He grew up in a tin-roofed house on the muddy banks of the Mississippi River. His father was killed in a sawmill accident when he was 6 years old. His mother worked as a washerwoman and a cook in the levee camps. There was no high school in his town for black children, so when he finished the 8th grade, he repeated it. Because staying in school, any school, was better than giving up. And then one day, he borrowed $500 against his mother's furniture. With that $500, he built the most powerful black media empire in American history. He put the faces of black Americans on magazine covers at a time when the rest of the publishing industry pretended those faces didn't exist. He reached 40% of every black household in America. He made the Forbes 400 list of the wealthiest Americans, becoming the first African American ever to do so. And beside him, every step of the way, stood a woman who took his publishing empire and added something it didn't have: a fashion revolution, a cosmetics line, and $55 million raised for black communities across North America. This is the story of the Johnson family, the richest black family in Chicago's history, and the reason their power echoes across every dimension of American culture, from the pages of a magazine to the runway of the world's largest traveling fashion show. Act 1. Arkansas to Chicago, the Great Migration and a boy who refused Arkansas City. Arkansas, 1918. John Harold Johnson was born into the kind of poverty that has no floor, the kind where you don't know how poor you are because everyone around you is equally poor. His family lived in a tin-roofed house near the levees, where the Mississippi River runs wide and slow and indifferent. When John was 6, his father died in a mill accident. The family was left without its provider. His mother, Gertrude, remarried a man named James Williams and did what she had to do to survive. She washed other people's clothes. She cooked for levee camp laborers. She kept her children alive through sheer force of will. There was no high school in Arkansas City for African Americans. Johnson chose to repeat 8th grade rather than stop his education entirely. Then came the Great Migration, that extraordinary movement of 6 million black Americans from the suffocating Jim Crow South toward the industrial cities of the North in search of something resembling opportunity. The Johnson family packed everything they had and moved to Chicago. Chicago gave John Johnson something Arkansas City never could: a high school. DuSable High School, where he graduated with honors, where he edited the school newspaper, where his classmates included a young Nat King Cole and a young Red Fox, a city still soaked in racism and economic inequality, but one that at least had doors to knock on. He knocked on every single one. Act 2. $500 and a mother's furniture. The birth of an empire. After high school, Johnson worked at Supreme Life Insurance Company while attending the University of Chicago. His job was to compile weekly news clippings about black Americans for his boss, a digest of what was happening in the world that affected his community. And as he compiled those clippings, week after week, an idea took shape. Black Americans were reading newspapers and magazines that treated them as invisible, or worse, as problems to be discussed rather than people to be celebrated. There was no national publication that showed Black America to itself with dignity, complexity, and pride. John Johnson decided to create one. He went to the banks. They laughed at him. They called him boy and showed him the door. So he went home. In 1942, using his mother's furniture as collateral for a $500 loan, Johnson mailed the first issue of Negro Digest. Within 6 months of launching Negro Digest, the magazine had a circulation of 50,000 readers. He had found his audience because his audience had been waiting for someone to find them. 3 years later, in November 1945, he launched Ebony magazine. The first 25,000 copies sold out in less than a month. Ebony was something nobody had ever seen. A glossy, beautifully photographed magazine about black life, not black struggle, not black crime, Not black poverty, but black achievement, black beauty, black culture, black joy. At a time when Life magazine filled its pages with white faces, Ebony put black faces on its covers and told black readers, "You are here. You matter. You are worth seeing." In 1951, he launched Jet, a compact weekly news magazine that became the most widely read black publication in America. Millions of households, barbershops, church pews, waiting rooms. Jet was everywhere Black America gathered. Johnson turned a $500 loan into a $300 million fortune, eventually becoming one of the most successful African American business people and one of the wealthiest people in the United States. In 1982, he became the first African American to appear on Forbes magazine's list of the 400 wealthiest Americans. The first, in 1982. A black man from a tin-roofed house in Arkansas, who repeated the 8th grade because there was no high school for black children, was standing on the Forbes 400 list alongside the Rockefellers and the Waltons and the Kennedys. Act 3. Eunice, the woman who built the other empire. Now we turn to the woman without whom this story is incomplete. Eunice Walker was born in 1916 in Selma, Alabama, the daughter of a physician and a high school principal. She was educated, cultured, and passionate about fashion in a way that the industry had never made room for women who looked like her. She married John Johnson in 1941, and from that moment, she didn't simply support his empire, she built a parallel one. In April 1958, a friend in New Orleans asked for help organizing a small charity fashion show to benefit a local hospital. Eunice Johnson didn't organize a small charity show. She created the Ebony Fashion Fair, the world's largest traveling fashion runway production. She personally traveled to London, Milan, and Paris, where, as the only woman of color, she sat front row, selecting and purchasing looks from the most prestigious fashion houses on earth. She had to fight for access. She had to beg, persuade, and in her husband's own words, sometimes threaten, to get European designers to sell to a black woman representing a black audience. But she kept showing up, and eventually the designers came to need her as much as she needed them, because Eunice Johnson became one of the largest individual purchasers of haute couture in the entire United States. The show toured 200 cities across America, Canada, and the Caribbean. It played to audiences of up to 5,000 people per show. In its half-century of existence, the Ebony Fashion Fair raised over $55 million for charity, funding scholarships, hospitals, community programs, and organizations serving Black Americans from coast to coast. It launched the careers of supermodels who went on to define the global fashion industry. Naomi Campbell, Iman, Beverly Johnson, Pat Cleveland, and Tyra Banks all walked the Ebony Fashion Fair runway on their way to becoming icons. And then came Fashion Fair Cosmetics. When Eunice Johnson noticed that the models at the Ebony Fashion Fair were mixing foundations to create the right blend to match their hues, she approached existing cosmetics companies and asked them to develop makeup lines suited to the specific needs of women of color. They refused, so she built her own. In 1973, Fashion Fair Cosmetics launched, one of the first luxury beauty brands in American history, created specifically for Black women. At its height, it was sold in over 1,500 department stores across the United States. It prompted Revlon, Avon, and Max Factor to finally develop their own lines for women of color, because the market Eunice Johnson had insisted existed was too large to ignore any longer. She didn't just create a cosmetics brand. She changed the entire beauty industry's relationship with Black women. Act 4. Emmett Till. The moment that defined the power of Black media. Here is the moment that explains why the Johnson family's power was never simply about money. In August 1955, a 14-year-old black boy named Emmett Till was brutally murdered in Mississippi. The men who killed him were acquitted by an all-white jury in just over an hour. Emmett Till's mother, Mamie Till, made a devastating decision. She insisted on an open casket. She wanted the world to see what had been done to her son. John Johnson and Jet magazine published the photograph. The Weekly Digest became known for its coverage of the civil rights movement, including the publication of Emmett Till's open casket photos. The mainstream American press refused to run it. Jet magazine ran it, full page, unflinching, undeniable. That photograph galvanized the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks later said it was the image of Emmett Till that was in her mind when she refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus. Historians credit that photograph with accelerating the movement that would eventually produce the Civil Rights Act of 1964. A black publisher from Arkansas City, Arkansas, with a $500 loan and his mother's furniture, published the photograph that changed America. That is not just wealth. That is power in its most consequential form. Act 5. The third generation, Linda and Alexa, carry the flame. John H. Johnson died on August 8, 2005, at the age of 87. His funeral at Rockefeller Chapel on the University of Chicago campus was attended by former President Bill Clinton, then Senator Barack Obama, Jesse Jackson, and Al Sharpton. In 2002, his daughter Linda Johnson Rice had been named CEO, becoming the first African-American woman CEO among the top 100 largest black-owned companies in the United States. Linda had grown up inside the empire. She had attended the Ebony Fashion Fair shows with her mother since childhood, absorbing the vision and the discipline that built them. She understood both the publishing side and the fashion side, having co-selected the Fashion Fair's couture collections alongside Eunice for decades. She carried the company through years of digital disruption that ultimately proved too powerful to overcome. The empire eventually filed for bankruptcy in 2019, a moment that broke hearts across Black America, even as the underlying archive, the photographs, the fashion collection, and the legacy were preserved through auction and transfer to institutions that recognized their cultural significance. And now comes the fourth generation. Alexa Rice, Linda's daughter and Eunice's granddaughter, is building Beach Beauty, a new cosmetics company she describes as a way to feel closer to her grandmother and continue the family legacy in beauty. She didn't inherit Fashion Fair. She is rebuilding the spirit of it, from her Gold Coast apartment in Chicago, one lip gloss at a time, carrying the DNA of a grandmother who had to beg European fashion houses for the right to sit in the front row. 4 generations, one family, one city, one unbroken commitment to making sure Black America could see itself, in print, on the runway, in the mirror. Act 6, Why the Johnsons Are Really So Powerful. John H. Johnson received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. He built a $300 million fortune from a $500 loan. He opened the commercial magazine marketplace to Black publishers and Black readers. He proved to corporate America that Black consumers existed, had spending power, and deserved to be spoken to directly, changing the advertising industry in the process. Eunice Johnson raised $55 million for Black communities through the power of fashion. She created a cosmetics industry for women the beauty world had deliberately ignored. She sent Black models down runways in Paris couture at a time when those same models couldn't walk through the front door of the hotels where the shows were held. Linda Johnson Rice ran the most powerful Black-owned publishing company in America for years, carrying a legacy that most people would have crumbled under. And Alexa Rice is starting again with a beauty brand in Chicago, named after a tree that grows slowly, bends without breaking, and lasts for generations. The Johnson family built their power not with oil fields or real estate empires or technology companies. They built it with pages, with photographs, with words, with clothing, with cosmetics. They built it by showing Black America to itself, with dignity, with beauty, and with the unshakable conviction that representation is not a luxury. It is the foundation of everything. And that conviction, born in a tin-roofed house in Arkansas City, carried north on the Great Migration, planted in Chicago's South Side, and now being tended by a fourth generation, is why the richest Black family in Chicago is not just wealthy. They are permanent.